Pavanquerio ya, pavanquerio ya.
So I'll show you a presentation that I showed for the keynote. I had, like I said, I had 7 minutes. I also want to point out the theme of the Ocean Decade is delivering the science we need for the ocean we want. Now, I made a comment about that in one of the panels because it's kind of like this, I feel like it's arrogant for us to think that this is an ocean that we want, as if we can just talk about our desires and, yeah, this is what an ocean we want. We want to have an ocean that's full of fish. We want an ocean that we can go out on our boats and with nice beaches and things like that. What I told the group was it's the ocean that we need on this planet, because the ocean is a living being, and it also controls our global climate. So any places where we have droughts, it's because there's a problem going on in the ocean sector. Any place we have more violent hurricanes, we have problems with wild fisheries in the oceans, and but people still look at the ocean as a thing that we can extract resources from, and also something that is a problem right now that they can fix, rather than trying to understand the relationship that we have with the ocean. So I'll show you quickly the presentation that I made. So this was just my title page. I'm from the Wolastoquey Nation in Nukukuk. So anyway, that was that. Okay, so click once. This is our 4 directions model. This is what it's close to a close representation to the Inca cross. And when we did our ceremonies yesterday and did the acknowledgements in the 4 directions, it felt like home to me to see that. So it was really important for me to sort of place myself in this context. So I showed this to these delegations from all over the world. And the other thing I tell people, and this, because these are teachings that came to me from many different elders. A specific one, her name is Gwen Bear. She has passed on into the spirit world, but she was very fundamental to me in my early 30s as to how I live and how I work. The circle is one of the most common symbols amongst spiritual groups and religions around the world, because it's a whole model. It doesn't have a beginning, it doesn't have an end, it's a whole cycle. We can think about the 4 seasons. We can think about the 4 times of day being sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight. And there's a whole bunch of, like, our planet is a circle, our moon is a circle, the sun is a circle, the atmosphere around our earth is a circle, a 3-dimensional circle. The other thing we talk about is that even though I put 2 lines here to represent 4 directions, you can also think of that as a circle coming outward, and this is a circle coming outward. So it's sort of also like a 3-dimensional model, right, in that respect. So can you hit that? So the 4 basic aspects we talk about when we learn about this is the 4 areas of health. So we know what physical health is. A lot of people understand that, just you get a cut, you can put a bandage on it. That's a physical part of your body. Mental health is something that came to prominence during COVID. People were stuck at home, they lost connection to family, there was a fear of isolation, and there was people that were in relationships that were not healthy. There was a rise in abuse and things like that had happened. There was a rise in things towards addiction. So that's the unhealthy part of the mental health aspect. But we have to pay attention to our mental health. The emotional health really talks about our relationships with people. It talks about, like, I had a hard time understanding this when it was first taught to me. And when I thought, okay, if I don't understand emotional healthy people, what's an emotionally unhealthy person? Then I think of somebody who gets angry very, very easily, or somebody who cries, like, seemingly too easily when something happens, or people who, like, laugh off things and make jokes about things that are really, really important. So now I kind of understand, like, okay, an emotionally healthy person is a person that fosters good relationships and is able to express themselves really well and invite other emotional people. The spiritual health is also something that's kind of difficult to understand. And what I get from that is you really have to have a connection to understand your place. When Lynn had mentioned residential schools, this was something that the Canadian government and the churches had done throughout Canada, and they had also done this in the United States, where they would take away the children away from the community. The schools were usually run by Catholic priests and nuns, but also the Anglican Church, the United Church, and there was one other that was implicated in that. They brought the kids in and they forbid the children from speaking their language. They were forced to learn English. And if they spoke their language, they were punished. And in a lot of cases, the federal government would actually experiment with medicines on these children for the rest of Canadians. Kids were abused, physically abused. Kids were sexually abused. And 3 years ago, grave sites were starting to be discovered, or being opened in Canada at these residential school sites. And right now we're up to, I think it's around 10,300 graves that were found at residential schools in Canada. And so people were first saying, well, that happened in the past, you got to get over it. But the thing is, we're only 1 or 2 generations from when that happened. The Pope came to Canada 2 years ago, and there was an expectation the Pope would apologize for the role of the Catholic Church, but the Pope did not do that. The Pope said that he expressed sorrow. He didn't say, I am sorry. He said, I am expressing sorrow, because the Catholic Church did not want to have the legal responsibility of being sued for reparations from Indigenous peoples. So there was a lot of controversy over when that happened as well. And I'll admit that I don't have time for the church. I do not follow the church. Some of my family members do, but I chose not to. I have 2 children. I am allowing them to make their own decisions on this. And if they want to do that, that's great. I will support them. But for me, that's not for me. I follow my native traditions. So these are 4 aspects of health. And in an individual, this is our mind. Everybody has a mind. This is our heart. This is our body. And this is our spirit. So every person, every individual has those 4 aspects. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm the most balanced person in the world. I have all kinds of challenges here and there. But every day I try. And the way that I try to do things is I try to learn something new every day for my mind. That's healthy for my mind. I try to foster a good relationship with individuals every day, at least once. I reach out to somebody, I talk to them, and I learn about them. And I embrace my emotions. If I'm feeling sad, I let myself feel sad, so I'll get over it. Because if you repress your emotions and hold it up, they will manifest in negative ways. Physically, I try to do something healthy for my mind every day. So that could be something like just walking up here from the places that we're staying. Because you walk up that hill and, man, felt my legs burning yesterday, So my heart was, was working. With the spiritual aspect, what I do is I spend a little bit of time outside every day, and I just marvel at the fact that it's a miracle that I'm here. If you think of all of the ancestors and how they had to survive in order for me to physically be here on this planet, then I look at vegetation. Even when I'm in a city, you will see trees. And just think about those trees that are growing up and reaching up to the sky. And you'll hear birds and how they have their own societies and communicating with each other. And know that we are connected to the other beings. So I just acknowledge that every day. Other days when I have opportunities, yes, I'll do small ceremonies for myself. So that's how I try to balance myself. And what we try to do also, we have to try to balance the things that are on opposite ends. So we know, like people, I have friends, they say, okay, I believe in this table, it's physical here, but I don't believe in spirit. Like, what is that, right? Well, when we go into ceremony, there's a ceremony that we do called sweat lodge, for example. A sweat lodge is a dome. It's usually about this high. It's a circle. We put hot rocks in there. We all come in, and the leader will pour water on the rocks, so the steam comes up, and it's dark. It's physically hard to breathe. You're cramped because you're sitting on the earth, and we are occupying the space above the earth, imagining the sweat lodge continues under the earth to touch the spirits under the earth. So that's part of the balance. But we suffer physically in order to get in touch spiritually. I have been on traditional fasts where we deprive ourselves of food. You have to work yourself up to it, but the final fast I did was 4 days with no food. So our body is physically dying in order to get in touch spiritually. So to me, that's a very pointed effort of trying to understand the balance between the physical and the spiritual. The mind and the heart, people will say the longest journey is from the head to the heart. There's a sort of you'll see it on Facebook, you'll see it in many different places. But to me what that means is sometimes something makes sense logically, but it doesn't feel right. Or sometimes something feels right, but you just can't make sense of it. So the best decisions we can make are the ones that make sense, but also feel right. All right? So that's what that is to an individual. So when this was taught to me, the other thing about this is that it works on an individual, but it also works at a societal level. We can extract these things on a society. So, can you hit the bar? So when we put this out to the society, our spirituality at a societal level becomes our culture. And you can tell a strong culture because you can see the physical manifestations in a community of the culture. If you go into a community and there's not, visible aspects of culture, that they probably suffer, they probably don't have good connection to culture there. The physical aspects becomes our economics. And when I first heard this, I had a hard time to accept that because I always look at global economics and I think that this is part of exploitation of resources. But when I thought about this, and sometimes it takes me months or years to figure these things out, I thought, okay, if Gwen Bear told me this is true, then this must have been true 500 years ago. So 500 years ago, what did the ancestors use as economics? So Lynn mentioned hunting for clothing. So the ancestors used to hunt. They would hunt caribou and moose and other species, and they would use the hides for clothing. They also would use those foods for sustenance and pick berries and other rooted vegetables and things like that, and medicines. They would build structures for housing, usually made of wood. Sometimes they would use caribou hides, but these were housing so that we'd have places and shelter to live. They would build things such as canoes or snowshoes or sleds for transportation. And they would have other goods for ceremonial or for trading with other nations. So today, we live in a culture, and when I receive money for work that I do, I use that to pay for my food, and to pay for my clothing, to pay for my home, and I have a car at my house, so I have an automobile for transportation, and then you can buy other things, to decorate your home and things like that. Now, the reason why I had the problem with this when I first saw it was because the economic system we have now is warped. So if you look at the life cycle of a tree, and I don't have the diagram here, but if I put the life cycle of a tree here, there are 4 stages. There's the birth of a tree, when it grows up out of the seed. There's the growth of the tree. But from birth, there's the death of the tree, because nothing lives forever. And the death of a tree is a process. Just like dying is a process. Sometimes it happens really quick, but it takes time. And then after death, the tree falls to the earth, and it starts to decay. So you have growth and you have decay. And that decay will feed the soil for other trees to grow. Our economic system is focused on the birth and the growth. You're supposed to create a small business, and under the global economic system, keep expanding that business. But they don't plan for the death or the decay. So in 2008, there was a global economic crisis. It was triggered by the United States because they had all these investors come in and they were selling them these, what they called the subprime mortgage crisis, where they were selling these bundles, this is a big finance thing, bundles to investors of mortgages for people that couldn't afford mortgages. And because there was a collapse, like the world's economies all suffered because of that. Like the bigger the tree, the harder the fall. I find that the oil industry, the carbon industry, is going through this natural cycle where they're actually going into the death because they're going to run out of carbon. You can't make oil. It was there from the dinosaurs, and there's no more dinosaurs. But what's happening in that balance is renewable energy. So we should plan for cycles in any economic endeavor that we do, and that we will have better sustainability. I didn't have a chance to talk about that at the World Forum on Oceans. So anyways, so that's economics and culture. The emotional aspect at our global scale, societal scale, is social or community. The community health. So that's the interconnections we have in our communities. How are we taking care of ourselves? And the mental aspects becomes our politics, where we create policies and laws, because these are mental aspects. They're mental exercises, you know, so we have to figure that out. So if we make policies, we have to involve the community. You can't go and make a law without involving the community, otherwise the community will not support the laws. When we invest in culture, there'll be economic sustainability and economic returns. And I believe that what is happening here is an example of that. There's economic value, like with respect to the tourism and the selling of the jams and things like that, because it's done in a culturally appropriate way. So this is really important for the value. Hit it again. There's another layer that I had worked on my own, just because I think about these things, and after a while, elders told me about this. I put knowledge systems up here. So that can be Western science, that can be Indigenous knowledge systems. And I always say Indigenous knowledge system because I want people to understand that there's a methodology behind it. It's not just information that you should just take from a community and own it and do your own stuff, because it's taken out of context. It's not respecting the whole value system and the whole methodology behind the creation of this information. I put biodiversity down here because that is the interrelationship between plants and fish, between people and the land, between wildlife and insects. We have to have biodiversity. So any kind of endeavor that promotes monoculture, anything that does, like aquaculture, for example, I just find that might be a temporary way to produce food, but it is much, much better and healthier to have natural fish, natural food systems. Technology, I put this over here because technology are tools that we need to actually do our work. They're physical tools to do our work. And I put the environment over here because that's something you can't really put your hand on, but I have a number of friends that will want to go out on the land. They'll want to go for hikes. They'll want to go out on the sea on a kayak. They'll want to spend time on the shoreline in order to get strong spiritually. So that's a really close connection to spirit. And again, we have the knowledge systems. We have to understand biodiversity before we start creating any kind of science programs. We have to promote that and respect that. We have to create technologies that are not going to harm the environment. So that's why that, to me, is also a very important thing. Same with our economics. We have to take the environment in check when we have economics. So when all of this stuff is in balance. Let's just pretend that we can put this in balance. Okay, hit one more time. If everything was in balance and our world was great, then you can kind of look at it as 4 pieces of the pie. But unfortunately, hit the button, this is what we have. We spend a lot of time, we value smart people, and we put a lot of investment. We think that we can learn our way out of problems. We know where our politicians are, and people kind of placate themselves up to politicians. They're always covered in the media. We know where the politicians are. We value economics and we value technology. We've put a lot of effort into that. We tend to make economic decisions to the detriment of environment and culture. And this is some of the discussions we're having today. We also don't value biodiversity, and we don't tend not to value the communities. So in North America, we have daycare for young kids, and then the teachers and the people that take care of our children, they're amongst the lowest paid. People who are working in hospitals, the nurses, they're taking care of people who are sick. They're the lowest paid. They earn the worst incomes, and they're super stressed. They're overworked. People who take care of our seniors in our senior home, again, they're underappreciated, they're underpaid. That's the society we have. Now, the reason why we have this, one more time, is because of fear. We live in a society, and I can't speak for down here, but this is our North American society. It's fear. There's fear that Canada is not going to be a prosperous country. When there was the war in Iraq, when George Bush was the president of the United States, he used fear of weapons of mass destruction to justify a war. But really, it was about economics because they wanted access to the oil reserves in Iraq. And individuals, we fear of growing old. We fear being poor. We fear that people won't like us. And advertising exploits that. You'll see advertisers, talk like there's a whole thing around beauty products, for example, a whole industry around that. You'll see the accumulation of wealth. But what I have seen is that people who make a lot of money and build these big homes, they kind of become a prison, because it's not like they're housing more people. It's just that they're creating more space for themselves, and there's a big loneliness behind that. So that tends to be what we have. But what changes this is a crisis. So when there's a death in my community, they close our band office, the chief and council, they won't have any meetings. And there was actually some deaths in my community this week, so they closed that, and they closed the schools. Most of the businesses will close down, and then the social leaders will take over, and they start to take care of the family. They'll produce food. They will gather together, and then the cultural leaders will start to take over, and they'll produce the ceremonies. And some people will go through church, but others, what we do is we light a sacred fire for 4 days and support the family through this whole process. When the airplanes flew into the Twin Towers in New York City, in 9/11, George Bush Sr., or Jr., he was up in this airplane, Air Force One. That didn't matter anymore. They closed Wall Street in New York City. The whole New York Stock Exchange closed down. People started gathering back with their communities. And I remember on that day, when that happened, I actually went to get my daughter at daycare, and I just took her to a park, and just she and I for an afternoon. All the stuff was happening. I didn't know what to do. I just wanted to be with her. And people were flocking back to the church when 9/11 happened. So this came up. But what keeps it in balance, one more time, is love. And there's that romantic kind of love you'll have with your life partner. You know, I understand that, somebody you're dating or whomever. But there's also love in the grander sense of self-respect, of appreciating people, of appreciating our nature that is giving to us. And when we were in ceremony yesterday, this is what we were really expressing, that love and respect that is needed in order to have a better balanced society. So it's too bad that we don't practice this regularly. Not you, not anybody here, I'm not saying that, but as a society, we don't tend not to practice that because we are pushed by society, by larger forces, primarily through the economics, to not fall behind, and not to be poor, and not to be lonely, and all these other things that are detriment to our health. One more. So it's my last slide. So this is the last slide I presented to the group. I'm a big promoter of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That has to be honored. You can't force that on any country, but most of the nation states around the world had signed on and said that they're going to respect that. For myself and the oceans, I want to respect the oceans as a living being. In this context, we understand the land as a living being as well. We talk about our Mother Earth here in our ceremonies. We talked about reciprocity here, you know, about giving back. If you give back, the ocean will provide, you know. The land will support those who support the land. We know this. I told the global community to invest in Indigenous peoples and Indigenous knowledge systems. I don't want people to just show up at our door and expect to take from us. What I want people to do is to come in so that we can build up our knowledge systems. We can start investing in modern technologies such as mapping systems. We have drone systems here, videos, databases, computers, all these modern tools that we need to manage the lands so that we can actually bring in other knowledges and other information so that we have better opportunities to understand what's going on. But I say invest. I want these global communities to come in and help us with that. Develop true and equitable partnerships with Indigenous peoples and coastal communities. So these partnerships, we can't do it alone. We need partners. That's so important to be able to do that, but I don't want somebody to come in and just expect you to be a partner. You have to build up that relationship. And when I tell people about relationship, they tend to kind of roll their eyes. They don't understand that. But what I say, like, well, if I go into a community that is new to me, I got to spend time there. They have to get to know me. If they don't know me, why should they trust me? Why would they think that I'm there for to help them? And it also opens my eyes to actually learn. I don't have all the answers. So all these industries that come in, they think they have the answers and they just want you to help with their projects. Well, if they're not going to help with your projects, then why would you work with them? I said prioritize and support coastal communities, food security, the natural ecosystem, rather than pulling from the resources, extraction. They look at the ocean, let's just take fish, take fish, take fish. Well, what are they doing to enhance, to ensure that we're going to have healthy fisheries in the future? And then this thing about planning for the future generations. In our nation, we talk about the 7 generations. So it took us 7 generations, this was a prophecy, to get to this point. They knew before contact all these different things that are going to happen at these different stages. So now it all came true, and we're living in the time of the 7th generation. We have to think 7 generations ahead in the things that we do today. I'm not going to solve climate problems, but I know that my actions today will help support others who come behind me to hopefully help with the climate problems. So that was the presentation I made. I decided last night that I thought that I would bring it out here. So hopefully that, even though this was for the ocean community, hopefully this is of value for our work here too. So that's it.